readership of all of these big UK newspapers has been going down and down and down. Certainly the print readership, and as more and more advertising moves online, their business model is coming under increasing pressure, and they're certainly not unchallengeable, because we've seen with our campaign, with the Stop Funding Hate campaign, our focus is actually very much on hate speech and on particularly, newspaper articles that demonise minority groups. And since our campaign started 3 years ago in 2016, we have actually seen some moves in a more positive direction from all of the papers that we've been challenging on those specific issues around hate speech. So it's absolutely not the case that everything's changed for the better, but it's a very mixed picture is actually what I'd say. And it's always a bit hard to tell how much of what we're seeing with these really quite horrifying examples like this Ben Stokes story, how much of that is almost a sign of the pressure that they're under, that there's an element of desperation maybe in this attempt to kind of find stories which are going to get attention and which are going to boost their sales on one particular day. Because actually, if you look at the long-term picture for a newspaper that behaves like this, it's hard to see how this is actually going to be beneficial for the Sun over the long term. There's been the most enormous outcry over what they've done, and if they want to build a brand that's going to continue to appeal to people over the longer term, they're going to have to find ways of operating that aren't going to keep alienating people.
I'm wondering with the Brexit process, Richard, how are the tabloids treating Brexit now? I mean, I know initially they were very pro-Brexit and very anti-European and very anti-migrant. Are they beginning to now question their original presumptions about what would happen and the benefit to the UK of that?
I mean, they're still very forthright with their particular perspective on Brexit. And I don't think that their position on Brexit fundamentally has changed, but we're actually not seeing the same levels of anti-migrant front pages and anti-Muslim front pages that we were. So the sort of political argument is still being pushed, but we're not seeing quite so much of the kind of way that divisive issues like anti-migrant sentiment were being weaponized in 2016. One thing that's really interesting is we commissioned an opinion poll with YouGov in the end of 2017, I think it was, and we wanted to do a kind of almost like a rating for how people viewed all of the major newspapers in the UK. And what was really interesting was just 5% of people said that they thought The Sun was a positive influence on UK society, and 50% of people said that they thought that the influence was negative. The Sun, the Daily Mail, particularly those newspapers, like to position themselves as the voice of a particular part of Britain, Middle Britain or Working Britain. But even within the groups that they sort of claim to represent, they're actually seen in a very negative light. In a society as big and complex as Britain, no one speaks for everybody.
Of course, not speaking for the whole population, they can still have quite an intense sort of relationship with a certain sector of it, though.
Well, there's definitely very close links between the UK newspaper industry as a whole and the political elites. I mean, clearly, you see that in the way that politicians move between being columnists for a particular newspaper and then being in positions of power, and then vice versa. So at the elite level, clearly there's a lot of influence and there's a lot of connection between the press in London and the political class in London. But actually, out there in the country, in the rest of the country that's not part of the political elite or the media elite, it's actually perhaps even increasingly disconnected.
That's Richard Wilson from the UK anti-tabloid group Stop Funding Hate. Canadian police have confirmed a senior police intelligence officer arrested last week for allegedly stealing sensitive documents had access to information from Canada's foreign allies. Cameron Ortis, the Director General of Canada's National Intelligence Coordination Centre, has been charged with breaching national security laws. His arrest has sent tremors through the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network, which includes New Zealand. The CBC's Ashley Burke reports from Ottawa.
These allegations, if proven true, are extremely unsettling.
It's the unknowns of this case that are causing so much concern. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Luckie held a media conference today.
I would definitely imagine that there is concern amongst our Five Eyes community.
She said Cameron Ortis had access to information from the Canadian intelligence community, as well as domestic and international intelligence partners. Just what information and how much of it was compromised is now under investigation.
Until we know what we're dealing with specifically, our risk assessment is fluid and the measure of severity of such an event is fluid as well.
P.Y. Bourdois is the former RCMP Deputy Commissioner.
My concern is ongoing operations and how these ongoing operations could have been compromised.
Bourdois says some informants or agents' lives could be at risk if they were identified.
Ashley Burke reporting. Indonesia's parliament is set to pass a raft of laws that critics warn are an alarming mix of Islamic fundamentalism and authoritarianism. The laws would criminalise matters of morality, like sex outside marriage, and there would be a new crime of insulting the president. Here's the ABC's David Lipson from Jakarta.
The protest outside Indonesian Parliament was noisy, as always, but by Indonesian standards, remarkably small, especially given the gravity of the issue at hand, an immense raft of new laws that seek to codify matters of morality as determined by the state. Under the revision, extramarital sex could land you in prison for a year, a move that effectively renders the entire LGBT community and countless thousands of Indonesians without formal marriage documentation criminals.
We have a lot of articles that intervene with the privacy matters.
Ricky Gunawan from Community Legal Aid Indonesia fears it's a big leap towards what has until now been creeping Islamic conservatism.
And then a lot of institutions have now becoming more and more conservative. Universities, public institutions. We are quite worried with the rise of conservatism in Indonesia at the moment.
Inside the Parliament building, we meet one of the proponents of the bill, Nasir Jamil, from the Islam-based PKS party.
So why is the government getting involved in morality? Isn't that God's area?
Indonesia consists of a number of religions, he replies. There are cultural values that need to be upheld. Therefore, we try to protect morality. The purpose of the penal code, he says, is to build a civilised society that is ethical and to maintain public order, because there's a lot of persecution and anarchism in Indonesia now because of a lack of regulation. Andreas Hassono from Human Rights Watch sees it very differently.
There are going to be more and more vigilantes arresting, surveilling couples, especially young people. There are going to be more beating against, taking the law into their own hands.
And he says, coupled with another article that criminalises insults against the president or vice president, cooks up an alarming combination.
So bad for Indonesia, because what we are seeing is Islamic fundamentalism on the one side and authoritarianism on the other side.
That's not all the current parliament wants to ram through before the newly elected parliament takes its place next month. Another raft of laws governing Indonesia's boldly successful Corruption Eradication Commission are set for passage. Among the critics who say the changes will hobble the anti-graft agency, the head of the commission himself, who effectively resigned late last week, handing his mandate back to the president. Andreas Hassono again.
If it is to be passed, I'm afraid corruption is going to have a good time again in Indonesia.
Indonesian Human Rights Watch researcher Andreas Hassono ending that report from the ABC's David Lipson. And that's World Watch and Midday Report for Wednesday. We're back at the same time tomorrow. From all of us here on the Midday team, have a great afternoon. Kia ora mai.
RNZ News at 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. The Māori King Tuheitia says mana whenua have finally reached consensus over what to do with Ihumatao and they want it returned. He says he's urged the government to negotiate with Fletcher's Residential to do so. The site near Auckland Airport has been the centre of an ongoing Māori land occupation to stop it from being turned into a housing development. At first, Kingi Tuheitia backed the development. The Kingitanga is set to get 8 out of 32 hectares back from Fletcher's. But he's since been holding talks with groups who whakapapa to the land. And spokesperson Rahui Papa says the King has felt the pulse of the people.
There is a consensus amongst the mana whenua, me whakahoki mai te whenua, to return the land to the rightful owners.
Rahui Papa says the government will have to figure out how to give the land back, and iwi are not ruling out developing it themselves. The Energy Minister says the nature of the international oil market makes it inevitable that from time to time fuel prices will spike. Missile and drone attacks this weekend on Saudi Arabian oil facilities caused a large hike in oil prices. They've since dropped more than 6% after an announcement repairs would be quicker than thought. Megan Wood says it's a fact of life that fuel prices are...
All right, so when we start answering questions, fellas can't make too much noise, okay? Because otherwise the microphone will hear you and hear your voices and they've got to hear these two ugly conversations. Where's Bobby? She'll come in? Baby? Oh, they're all over there. Moana! Moana! Bobby! Jeez, you fellas are lucky. Get the hole, everybody. Just recorded your voice. So kia ora, so we've got 3 of our 4 māngai here that will be speaking today. I'm going to hand it over to them and they're going to tuku mahia te kia koutou, te tuatahi. Because it has been a little while since we've been in this situation. So I'll just hand it over to them. Ka pai. You 3 up closer please. Come closer behind me, please, Mana.
Ka pai ko te tuatahi, ka mihi ake ki o koutou. Nau mai hoki mai. Ki te whenua nei, we know it's been a little while since our last stand-up and our last meeting with you guys, with the media. So we'll just go straight into Q&As. Thank you.
Keanu, does this give you added, I guess, motivation to carry on with the kaupapa, given this backing from the Kingitanga?
Yes, of course. From the outset, we have said the development needs to be stopped and the whenua must be returned. And so to have this consensus and to have that supported by the Kingitanga movement is the best outcome for us that we could have sought from this process.
It says it has consensus from mana whenua. Who is mana whenua?
Well, we know that we have been part of the discussions as Makaurau Marae, and there have been other parties. You'll have to ask the Kingitanga who else they've been talking to.
So what is your message now to the government, to the Prime Minister and those Labour Māori MPs?
It's the same message that the King has put out this morning, which is the government needs to now work with Fletchers to have this land returned. This is not a treaty settlement issue. This must have an innovative, creative approach to finding the solution and on how it's going to be returned. There is money there, both from Auckland Council and from the government, that can be put towards this kaupapa. There are things that Fletchers could do to help to have this land returned. Now was the time for those parties to come together. Jacinda has said for the last 6 weeks that she was waiting for this process to come to an end, or for the King to find the consensus or the resolution that has now been sought. It's now time for the government to start playing the game.
And you mentioned the council. What involvement does the council have from your perspective in this whole setup?
The council, like the Crown, have been part of the broken system that has led to what's happened here at Ihumātao. The systemic failures for generations have been both the council and the Crown, and so both of them have a responsibility here. Obviously, the Crown as the tuakana will have the most responsibility, but I do know that the council has $1.8 billion over the next 10 years for open space. If they were to go 50-50 with the Crown, that's only 1.5% of that budget. And so they should be taking a stand here. We know that elections are coming up. Whether or not Phil Goff is brave enough to make a statement and put something forward before the elections is up to him. But I do hope that they see this as something they must move on now.
There's other candidates as well. There's John Tamihere. Would you expect him to make a statement in support?
Most definitely. John Tamihere is Māori. He is wanting to be the next mayor. He has in the past talked about his support for Ihumātao, and so should be making a statement around this.
Can you confirm that the Kingitanga would not develop the land if they were to buy it back, or what would happen with any development there?
So the Kingitanga is not buying back the land. So the statement this morning is that the Kingitanga has worked with mana whenua to find a resolution, and that is that we have come to the consensus that the land must be returned. From my understanding, reading the press release this morning, the Kingitanga has put their onus back on the government and on Fletcher's.
If the land was to come back to mana whenua, would that completely rule out any development here though?
At the moment, the land returning to mana whenua comes under the principles of kingitanga around mana motuhake and around siaki whenua. And so the land being returned is for us to determine what happens to it moving forward. What that looks like is up to us to determine, and that's still another step in the process and is still a long way away. So what does development actually mean? No, because we've never had the opportunity to determine for ourselves what happens in Ihumātao, and that's what this has allowed to happen. Having the land returned to mana whenua allows mana whenua to determine for themselves the future of Ihumātao, allows us to thrive and not just be in constant survival mode.
The government is willing to find a resolution with all parties involved. I suppose, what's your reaction to that?
That's great. Kia ora.
Would you be happy to sit down with Peters or Ian or call her back to the land again?
So it's been 54 days since the invitation went out to the Prime Minister. That invitation still stands. We have always been open to speak with politicians, with the Prime Minister, with anybody who wants to come and discuss the future of Ihumātao. And so should that option be available to us, of course we would take it.
Kia nei about mana whenua. Does Kingitanga also qualify as mana whenua here?
Kingitanga is a movement, and so Kingitanga is not one individual person, nor is it an individual iwi. Kingitanga is a movement for those who subscribe and believe in Kingitanga.
Or would you say then Tainui? Are Tainui mana whenua here?
As far as I'm aware with the conversations, Tainui hasn't been part of the discussion as the iwi. Do they have mana whenua here? There are layers of mana whenua here.
Do they have mana whenua here?
There are layers of mana whenua here. I can't say who is and who isn't. I can say that we are.
Have you guys had any response from Kaurera Amakuchi at all, or any discussions?
Privately, no.
Can I just back to the housing development? So if you were to decide, mana whenua were to decide to go ahead with the housing development, how do you think that would sit with people who've been occupying the land for the past 7 weeks?
We're not discussing the future of the land whatsoever. We're not discussing a housing development or anything. What we're discussing right now is returning the whenua to mana whenua.
So what happens now with occupying post today's announcement?
Well, we're still here because the land still isn't secure. So all today's announcement has been is that there is a consensus that the King is supporting, and the Kingitanga movement is supporting that consensus. What happens from here is now up to the government and up to Fletcher's to play their part in securing this whenua. So we will still be here until the whenua is safe.
Do you have any scheduled meetings? What comes next now?
At the moment, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a scheduled meeting within the next day. The release that you were all sent this morning is the latest news. Everybody's up to speed.
Obviously, Pania's not here. Why is that?
Pania's overseas at the moment. She's having a much-deserved break.
How was today's announcement received by everyone
of you want to have a kōrero?
He honori tēnei karere ki a mātou I te mea ko roa te wā mātou he whawhai ana tēnei whawhai me tō mātou kotahi. Ko ki te mātou I te tautoko a te kingitanga. So we are honoured to receive the, what do you call it? The media release from the kingitanga this morning. Because for a long time we have stood alone and with not much support for this kaupapa, and to have our kingitanga behind us, it's an honour. Ai he uaua, engari I te taha o te māngaitanga mo te marae, anō he honori. So, yeah, ka tū maia tonu, ka tū pakari mo tō tātou iwi te take.
Would you anticipate when Jacinda gets back from overseas, you'd still be keen to see her really here, show up to discuss the future of Ihumātao?
Yes, the invitation is always open to Jacinda to come. It's disappointing that she hasn't come yet, especially because she would have had a much better understanding of what's been happening here when this news came out today, and she would have been in a much better position to have had personal experience of the whenua and of the take here. So we do hope that when she returns, the airport is just 2 minutes down the road. She can stop in here before she has to go to the next place. So it would be great for her to come and visit, to hear the kōrero, hear the stories of Ihumātao, to hear the kōrero of the people.
And just to confirm, occupying, this will continue until the land is returned. There's no stop in the occupation.
The reclamation will continue until the land is safe, yes. Ka pai.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou, thank you whānau.
Barrage! Had to be you, eh, Buck? Yeah. Should have done the tahirua tori bar. Oh.